This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl episode, so they say, 110. Any shark sightings today, Tim?
There's been a lot recently. I mean, I think Rockaway, there's just tons. They had to shut it down for a day. Long Island's there's been a lot. I mean, it's been a sharky summer. I mean, Cape Cod, forget it.
You know, I want to ride one and I want to touch a nose and have it go upside
Oh
down.
boy.
You know me. I like, what else am I going to do? It's the summer. I mean, I just figure, why not try it?
Well, there's about 3 or 4 species you don't want to do that with, but maybe you could handle it.
Who knows? I mean, I used to eat a lot of sharks just thinking if they ever bit me, they'd let me go. So, I might be prepared.
I assume mako shark was what you would eat?
I would eat any kind of shark I could get my mouth around.
Tasty.
Well, although I love the sharks, and even though it seems like they're proliferating on the East Coast and up here, and they're trying to escape the poisoned algae down near Florida, I don't eat them anymore because I'd rather pet one.
I mean, I know you have a nice story, but this would be a nice segue into one of my stories if you want me to.
I think, yes, I want you to segue.
Well, it's a more of an ominous kind of sad one. And it's kind of connected with the sharks and what's going on, why there's all these weird sightings of things that just were never seen in certain parts of the globe and certain parts of the oceans until recently. And a lot of the new models are basically talking about the collapsing of the Gulf Stream. Now,
terrifying,
yes,
really
yes.
terrifying.
I mean, there was a lot of models since the 1950s, just basically watching its erratic behavior and it's connected with global warming, all that stuff. Now, the Gulf Stream, I think most people know what it is. It's basically this conveyor belt that releases heat from the equator coming out of the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, goes up the east coast of the continental United States. In the winter, it goes to about Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. It's kind of like a little bit of a seesaw from that point on up north. In the summer, it hugs the coast all the way to Cape Cod. But ultimately, it shoots into Europe, which, for instance, Copenhagen, northern Scotland, that's the same level of like Churchill, Ontario, which is where all the polar bears are. Where you go if you want to do polar bear tourist sighting things in the Hudson Bay. In other words, the Gulf Stream makes Europe inhabitable. I mean, Europe's way further north than people realize. And if that thing gets disrupted, it's just going to cause chaos in the Atlantic.
Is it climate change that's disrupting it? Is it
absolutely. All of it's connected. Nothing to do with the jet stream. And it's just the imbalance. It's the of heat, greenhouse gas, all of that stuff. And so strangely enough, of course, idiots that know nothing about this stuff were like, oh, see, it's been one of the coldest winters ever. Therefore, global warming is not happening. So basically, if you disrupt the Gulf Stream, you will see the North Atlantic turning into basically a giant North Pole. I mean, it'll be like the equivalent to, as I said, like Churchill, Ontario, or just northern Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba.
Well, what people don't get is when you say global warming, it also means global freezing. It also means extremes of weather. And that's why climate change is a much better term, but idiots still can't wrap their heads around it. The thing is, the earth is heated up already. And right now over a lot of Europe is what's called the Lucifer Dome, a heat dome, 114 in Seville. I mean, it's just,
everything's out of whack.
We're fucked.
If the Gulf Stream unravels, and they say very well could in the next 100 years, could happen in the 50 fucking years. And it went from like, hey, it's a possibility to likely. And these are the top climatologists. And I mean, the Atlantic, get ready. We're not going to be able to recognize what that's going to look like. It's going to create all types of insanity.
And I talk about this occasionally, and I love to give the stats, but anybody that doesn't think there's a climate problem right now, I don't know where they're freaking living. I mean, Alaska at 112. I mean, I'm not even going through it. We've already been over it in various intros, but I don't know where anybody is living if they think there is not a climate issue. So wherever they are, invite me over.
Yes. Shamaya Lynn was on her Zoom conference call for work when suddenly they heard a bang And she collapsed to the ground. And then I go, Shavai, are you there? And then they see that kind of her toddler in the background, kind of just running around, kind of clueless. Well, the toddler had found a loaded handgun without the, whatever little protection
safety device.
Safety device. Yeah. And he basically shot her right in the head, not knowing what he was doing. I mean, gun wound, and upon arrival, it was clean right to her head. And
I mean, look, I mean, come on, people. I'm not 100% against guns, because I'm not, but you got to know safety first. Lock them up, or don't let children get their hands on. This isn't the first story, and it's out of control everywhere. And this is just another example of the mania that is besieging this country as we speak. It's just maniacal.
Well, also there's also a socioeconomic thing where it's like no one's looking at the kid because she can't afford it, and she has to run to this fucking Zoom conference. I mean, whatever. She probably shouldn't have had a loaded handgun hanging around, but she's doing a million things. People are stressed, and just the pressures of just that lead to just bad scenarios such as this. Yeah, pretty insane. Crystal Strauss, a woman, just got married to John Tydian. He's the man who had just served 32 years for murdering her brother. I guess they started talking. Maybe he wanted to make peace with it. Blah, blah, blah. They fall in love. He's in prison. They fall in love. And then she's convinced, and it might be true, that he didn't do it. And they kind of dug up some new evidence. And now he's in house arrest. They got out of jail and they got married in the backyard, and he has a retrial coming up. So we don't really know, but they're in love. They're in love. And she said, I'm not asking anyone to understand this.
Well, maybe they need to look at her about the murder of her brother.
That's what I was thinking the first thing.
I'm just saying, unless, women do kill, not enough, and not the right people as far as I'm concerned. But anyway.
All right. Well, you can go on to your thing now. Those are my.
You know what? It kind of all ties into this. I just read this great article. I'm going to read most of it now, and it was just published in Salon by Matthew Rosa, and he's a staff writer occasionally for Salon. He holds an MA in history from Rutgers University, and he's working on his PhD in history. So he has this concept that he's breaking down called malignant normality, the psychological theory that explains naked emperors, narcissists, and Nazis. If one person's crazy beliefs suddenly become mainstream, that is malignant normality. The concept of malignant normality, is explained by psychiatrist Dr. Robert J. Lifton, is rooted in history, specifically in our understanding of Nazi Germany. So Dr. Lifton argued that many Nazi doctors weren't active ideologues, but were willing to send people to the gas chambers because it was their job, even though they took the Hippocratic Oath. The reality of institutionalized genocide, which had not seemed plausible to Germans only a dozen years earlier, had become a malignant normal. Now, not everyone had to buy into the ideas of Nazism, at least not in full. They simply had to live in a society where actions that would usually be considered atrocious are instead perceived as routine. So they didn't have to believe in Hitler's lies, but they had to at least accept that a social order based around those lies could be legitimate. Sound familiar?
Oh, yes.
The moral system and fundamental political beliefs of millions of people have been radically altered, and all of it is based and was based and is now today based on a narcissist's word. The last detail is crucial to understanding malignant normality. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula told Salon that she's done research in the area of narcissism and high conflict personalities, and that malignant normality are basically mass delusions that originate from a specific source. So, for instance, in the case of the Nazis, Adolf Hitler channeled his personal grievances and ideological obsessions into a philosophy that was embraced by millions who held his word to be infallible. Hitler flat out fabricated conspiracies about Jewish world domination, plots against him, other Nazis, the supposed cause of German woes. Hello. And by virtue of him saying these things, they were held to be true. And the consequences were World War II and the Holocaust. Quote, delusion as a psychotic symptom is a break from reality, no doubt. Citing examples of people who think they can talk to Martians or believe the FBI is reading their thoughts. And while most individuals would tell someone who harbors those beliefs that they're delusional, A malignant normality will be reinforced by numerous outside sources, news outlets, religious institutions, political commentators, Fox News, and even entertainers will constantly, telling a believer that it's a certain falsehood is true. So this delusion, because it's shared by the masses, seems credible. Yet a mass delusion is not in itself the same thing as a malignant normality. Psychologist Dr. John Gartner, who studied narcissistic behavior and circulated a petition to remove diaper Donnie Trump from power because of his alleged mental illnesses, told Slocum that the unique form of mass psychosis, known as malignant normality, is basically organized from the top. It depends on an individual or an institution deliberately lying and having that lie reinforced through apparatuses that people view as potentially credible. Quote, what we learned is that people's construction of reality is fungible. It's flexible. It can be manipulated, especially when it comes from the top. And that's very important to understand. And especially, when there is propaganda. And especially when there's social reinforcement among people. So we have another doctor that, checks in on this, and he's worked with cases at Dr. David M. Rice, and he's worked on cases involving borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. And he said that he sees 4 types of people at this point, and he's been investigating this, who are susceptible to believing in a malignant normality. And he noted that these categories often overlap. So the first group are people who are already narcissistic and connect with another narcissist, like all the freaking politicians. All right. And there is a condition related to this called narcissism by proxy. The second are people who have sadistic or nihilistic aspects that be incels to their personalities and feel empowered to act them out by embracing a narcissist lie. There are also people who, through neediness, are attracted to those who appear very powerful without malice or really thinking through their basic attraction. And then there are those, finally, who are sincerely confused and gaslighted, where they're basically put in a position where a person with power, and it doesn't have to be a political power, it could be a power within a family, is telling them something that is absolutely goes against all reality. And now the group of people that are left feeling that either that people that they trust are crazy, well, each position, it doesn't matter. Each option is terrifying. So what kind of person would be at the top to form a malignant normality? And the answer, not surprisingly, a malignant narcissist. Like Hitler being rejected as an artist, or Trump losing an election, or everything else, the malignant narcissist channels personal failures into a larger cause, then uses their charisma to sweep others along with them. They're not just narcissists, Dr. Gartner explained. They experience themselves as being under attack by bad people. So all the negativity is projected outward. They can never be responsible for anything because they think they've never done anything wrong, but they're victims of unfair attacks. How many times have we heard that out of the fucking dumper's mouth? Such malignant narcissists propagandize the notion that bad people, Jews, immigrants, liberals, Democrats, whatever, are trying to destroy us and destroy our society. Therefore, anything we do to them, the insurrection, hang them, shoot them, is justified. Now, in closing, it must be emphasized that malignant normalities are not limited to politics. According to Olivia James, a London-based therapist who specializes in trauma and has interacted with many malignant narcissists, I think we know a few malignant narcissists.
No comment.
Thank you. We can succumb to malignant narcissists in many ways. Example include those who get suckered in by multi-level marketing campaigns or other cultish business ventures. So, and when that happens, I mean, and this is, the Jim Jones, the latest sex cult, all of this, the Barty Madoff, any criticism of the guru or founder or their promise is treated as your problem, your negativity, your shadow, your stupidity. Any doubts can also be treated as a test of your faith. So you quash them and keep mainlining the Kool-Aid. You and your fellow believers are also like a tribe. There is a sense of belonging and connection. She added, when people eventually realize they've been scammed, they crash very hard. She said she's treated many of these cases, and betrayal is one of the most serious types of trauma. We exist in connection with others. And of course, cults are another example. I mean, they get their followers and give them an alternative framework for reality. Everybody in the cult believes that, walking away from your family, giving up all the money, giving up your identity. Everything is allowed because it creates a system of pressures that make it difficult for people in the cult to leave, both because their sense of reality is warped and because they fear what awaits them if they admit to having erred or leaving Scientology, for instance. Trump's insistence that he is a very stable genius, while denigrating the work of actual geniuses and experts and relentlessly gaslighting anyone who challenges him, is the ultimate in narcissism and in malignant normality, says Deborah J. Cohen, a professor of sociology at the University of South Carolina. A lot of doctors checked into this article. She described how Trump has been able to normalize a bullying behavior that did not exist before him and has been effective at using media to make his version of reality a part of the political mainstream, even when it is entirely based on lies. Now, in a liberal democracy whose primary tenet is rationalism, it's clear that malignant normality is an aberration that threatens the organization of a society. So how are we going to stop it? Quote, to some extent, a lot of people aren't going to stop their beliefs until they're confronted, until there's an intervention, until circumstances change. But it doesn't mean that that's going to change them anyway. It's almost like trying to take away a person's religion or their God. They don't want you to do it. And so it's a really hard sell to bring people back to reality. And I think we're now seeing the downstream effect of what I consider to be, quote the doctors, population level gaslighting and malignant normality. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. And this didn't just happen now, and it didn't just happen with Hitler. This comes around again and again in many different countries.
Isn't social media in all forms kind of a malignant normality? I mean,
well, of course. I mean, and by the way, who are you going to trust anyway? And this is the problem. I just heard something today that about the people that don't want to be vaccinated, that most of them don't get their information from Fox News. They're getting it from Facebook, which is of all the information you could drum up, whatever. I don't have much more to say because that is obsessed. The study of what we're stuck in still as the lies continue is kind of where I'm at right now, but this is nothing new to me.
What about benign normality? That's kind of boring,
what about
right?
The banality of normality.
Now
what about norms make me sick? But I mean, what is normal? Look, I am not here to judge what is normal or not. I am for everything that is not normal. And that's why our next guest, who's written many books on many different subjects, from William Burroughs to Richard Kern to underground films, a book called Good Cop, Bad Cop, and continues to write in somebody I've known for many, I don't even know how many decades, and that would be Jack Sargeant. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Jack Sargeant. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Jack Sargeant, who I've known for I don't know how many decades. Filmmaker, film journalist, book writer, author, general roustabout, world traveler, professor, film instigator, and film curator. How does that sum you up, Jack?
Yeah, I wouldn't say film professor because
I would.
But if you want to make me a professor, I'll take it.
How about English expat?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, so I'm from England. I live in Australia, but I always find those kind of definitions so odd,
Sure.
Why do you live in Australia?
I think once he saw Yahoo Serious, it was all over.
Look, I think I like the idea. Yeah, I've got that thing in me. I like to travel. I like to see other places. And I got to a certain point in my life where I thought I need to be somewhere else. And I met someone from Australia, so it seemed kind of natural. But I always had this plan. I'd live in lots of different places in my life.
Like me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that whole, I don't want to be constrained by something. I like the idea that you can, just explore the planet. Life's too short. I want to see as much of it as possible.
Well, it's a long way when you leave Australia to go anywhere else, unless you're going to New Zealand or Tasmania, though.
Oh, my
That is a
God.
problem.
Now what's weird, of course, is it's a lot harder. But, you know, when I moved here, it was like I was spending a lot of time in San Francisco and LA seeing people. So it seemed like, you know, that's actually the same distance from Sydney as it is from London. So,
You know what I feel? It's like when we're on tour, it doesn't matter where your ass is for X amount of time. You're going to do something you need to do. So it could take 2 hours, it could take 10 hours, it could take 20 hours. Your ass is going to be someplace on to the next location. Doesn't matter how long it is. I love to go to Australia. It's one of my favorite places to tour.
The last time, well, that was one of our last tours. We had a few shows afterwards, but that was a incredible one. And you know, in the beginning, I'm like, well, I couldn't put my finger on Australia. You know, it's like Southern California meets England. What is this? And then I was like, oh, you know what? I got to not party all night. I got to get up in the morning and kind of go out and check it out. And I actually kind of fell for it. I was like, oh, this is actually, I'm having a good time here.
You loved it because you hugged a koala.
That's one of the reasons, for sure, for sure.
So, Chuck, what have you been doing during this endless lockdown? Because Sydney is again locked down. What's been going on? Writing 10 more books? What's going on?
Yeah. So working on books, working on proposals for books, writing introductions for a couple of people's books.
All right. Can you be a little bit more specific? So you've covered a lot of subjects. Let me just name a few for people that don't know. I mean, you've written about burrows, you've written about true crime, you've written about the cinema of transgression. That's only scratching the surface. You've written about films, basically the subculture, intelligentsia or ignorant transgressives, and all kinds of things like that. So what now is catching your eye? What more is there? There's a lot more to say, but what are you talking about?
So at the moment, I'm finishing a book about Geordie Vowles, who works under the name of Vagina Dentata Organ, which I've been writing for a handful of years now, and that's nearing completion. I wrote an introduction for a book of photographs by Karolina Urbaniak of Martin Bladh called The Torture of 100 Pieces for Infinity Land Press. What else have I done?
Let's talk a little bit about some of your other interests for photography books, because actually you wrote a piece in a book of my photos that was, I feel, the best thing anybody's ever written about me. And thank you very much for that. I mean, you really nailed it. You just did.
That was The Gun Is Loaded, right?
That was a photography book I was not very happy with. It came out of the UK. They did a terrible job of printing, but you did an excellent job of summing up, especially my exhibit, You Are Not Safe in Your Own Home, putting it where it belonged in the trauma zone and talking about duende.
To me, what you were doing in those photographs was so important. I was able to totally kind of plug into what you were doing, I think. And I remember walking around the exhibition with you in Birmingham, in England. And then there was that big empty building we all went to as well. And I think you took some more photos in there. So
reconstructed it by the abandoned photos, yes. But also, thank you about that. But also, Roman Slocum, talk a little bit about his art if people aren't familiar with it.
I wrote an introduction. So Romain Slocum was a French photographer and writer. And he was doing a lot of photographs of women in bandages and stuff.
Not familiar.
Broken Dolls was one of the books. I don't know if that's the one you wrote the intro for.
But I can't remember which one I did. I think I might have been Tokyo Sex Underground.
I think it was.
So yeah, I wrote an introduction for his book, and then I'm just trying to think what other ones. I mean, there's always because I'm really interested in photography, so I write a lot. I seem to write a lot about photography, and obviously, as you said, the whole film thing, and especially underground film, and plugging into that whole world of underground film. So obviously, I started off when I was 25 writing Deathtripping, all about Kern and Zed and so on, and that whole scene. So that really
kind of the definitive Bible of the cinema of transgression.
Yeah, and it's that wasn't my intention when I wrote it. It was like I was really young. I thought somebody else would come and write something else.
They haven't.
Yeah, it's I kind of grew up immersed in that world. I mean, I was like 14, 15 years old going and buying all those research books and stuff.
Our good friend Vivel, he's been on the show. I just saw him last week in San Francisco. Yeah, I mean, in fact, what Vale did with those books and Andrea Juno and stuff did with those. Incredibly strange films, incredibly strange music, angry women, on, burrows, etc.
There was I remember reading those and just being blown away, and that really inspired me. So
Where were you living at the time when you were 14? Were you in the UK?
Oh yeah. No, I was living in Brighton. At the
Brighton,
time.
okay.
And so I was thinking about this because when I was 14, so you're reading books like this. This was like 82. Somehow I ended up seeing bands like the Dead Kennedys and the Birthday Party and stuff all around 82. So I would be like 14 on the edge of 15. And it was like this whole world opening up to you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, things like research for a lot of that.
You're 14, 15 in Brighton. Yeah. Are eyes on the prize suddenly? Your world's opening up and you're like, I need to move on. I need to get out of here. I need to go somewhere else. Or were you just kind of taking it in at that age?
Well, so much was happening in England, in London and Brighton at that time.
Big time.
Anyway.
Big time.
Yeah. When I was a little bit older, I'd go up to London to see shows as well. But we had a lot of bands coming to Brighton.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And at a really young age, I started going to shows. And I remember there's a club in Brighton at the time called the Zap Club. And I remember Lydia coming to read there in, I'm going to say 84, might have been 85. And things like that, just being like this kind of world that was just coming to you. So everything that was kind of underground and counterculture was turning up in Brighton. And then if you liked it, you get on the train and it's 45, well, it's an hour or whatever to London. And you'd see it again in London. So I saw a whole load of things, loads of exhibitions, a lot of performance art. So that was just like a gateway to me, you know.
And so when did you decide? So you went to university. When did you decide you were, like you said, you were 25 when you wrote Deathtripping, or in your 20s? What made you decide, okay, I have to write a book? And then you got it published, which is amazing. But there were also independent publishers at that time. There still is. But
I think I always wanted to write. It was something I've always done. For me, more is, but I didn't know how to approach what I wanted to write about, you know. And so that was what took me a long time. But I mean, I did lots of other stuff as well in my late teens. Like I used to put on bands and stuff. So I put on shows by various bands and various events. And so I got into kind of curating stuff as well.
That was the start of your curation, which is carried on to this day. Who were some of your favorite bands that you were seeing in Brighton or London in that period?
I mean, it's like, you know, the canon, you know, it was seeing stuff like the Birthday Party, seeing stuff like Scratch Acid, seeing stuff
Wire.
Yeah, I never actually saw Wire till a lot later.
They were amazing then. Go on.
They were. The Swans. So the Swans played the Zap Club, and the Zap Club, I don't know if you'll remember it, but it was these two arches on Brighton Seafront that were really long and thin under the road, and they were maybe 50 meters long and 20 meters wide. And the Swans had a PA in there. The road above it was shaking. And I remember that I was actually, pretty sure that was a gig I was photographed at in the audience, like looking up. And that was in Sounds or NME or something. And every now and again, you know, it's one of those things that people send you on social media. But I remember just that experience of the sheer volume and the power and just having that sense of the physicalness on your body. And there's a tension in that I'm still trying to resolve between kind of living in my head and thinking about everything and that physical being punched of sound. And it's like that tension between thinking and the physical is something that I think I've grappled with ever since. And that's why all that transgression stuff appeals to me, because it's very physical, you know, but at the same time, I'm kind of a thinker.
Well, it's interesting that you chose wisely not to become a musician. And even though, especially considering the conundrum you just said, I mean, it is our duty, mine, Tim, and others, to pound you with our sounds, letting it go inside your head, impregnating you so you could spit it out beautifully on a page.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's definitely that aspect to music. The good music does that. It does.
Music is, according to very eloquently written in Pierre Boulez's Orientations. He always talks, music it's an art form, clearly. It's a craft. You're doing all this stuff, but it's also a science. And it's a long history and in both its analysis and its actual realization. It takes molecules, it takes air to move it. and it does impact you. It's completely physical.
I was just reading an article today, Tim, about how people who have the more empathy you have, the more music, and this is from a neurological sense, that it affects you, which is why I guess dumb people like dumb music. Just saying. Had to get that in. So, I mean, Jack, was the first, were you doing any journalism before you decided to just write a whole book, or did you just dive right in?
Like fanzines and stuff like that, but not music, not journalism. And I just dove in and wrote a book. It seemed like the only way to do it in the end.
Who put that out? Deathtripping.
That was, of course, Creation Books. Yeah.
Is that how we met? Through Creation Books.
We met. The first time we met was when you did that spoken word gig in Brighton. I was like a teenager and I came backstage and I think I was too terrified to talk to you.
So you just looked.
I think I said kind of, I squeaked hello, but I remember because I think Thirlwell was in the room as well. And I
have no idea.
I was a fan. So I was like kind of slightly overwhelmed. So I was just one of a gang of teenagers in there with black hair hanging over our faces. But that was the first time. But then properly it was, it would have been in the mid 90s. And it was either through that book or it was through me. I interviewed you for that other book I did, Suture. So I think it was probably that was the first time you and me sat down properly and talked.
Well, because Creation Books, they bugged me for a few years to write a book. And I said, when you have the money to let me sit down for a couple of months, I'll write it. And they did. And hence Paradoxia, which is still in press. Thank you, Akashic Books, but very happy about that. They used to publish some good books until the head of Creation Books took off to Thailand and disappeared without paying most people. I got paid.
I've stuck with small publishers even now because, I come from that. That's my background, and I couldn't conceptualize bigger things in a way. So I'm quite happy being on small publishing houses, and I really like that.
The biggest publishing house I worked with fucked everything up when I released my cookbook. And I have to say, I'll stay with small press because at least you can get copies to sell on tour and make more money doing it that way than waiting for a quarter to come your way when you're chump changing it. So Deathtripping, and then you got to meet quite a few of those people. Did you come to New York and interview people for the Deathtripping book?
That was the first time I went to New York, and I flew over and I was there for 4 days. So Creation Books, they fly me over. And they didn't, they were a small publishing house. They had no money. So they flew me over, stuck me in a hotel for 4 days. And I'd only arranged to meet Kern and Zed. And Richard was like, great. He introduced me to everyone else involved in it that weekend. He said, you got to talk to Beth. You got to talk to Tommy. You got to talk to Tessa.
And that means Beth B, Tessa Hughes Freeland, and Tommy Turner.
Yeah.
Other filmmakers.
And it was great because he introduced me to these people, and they, I'm still in touch with them all to this day. It was a really good experience. And look, I have to say that, I was just like naive. I didn't know what was going to happen, and those guys were just really good to me, and they really helped.
What year was that? Was that 84, 83?
No, 93.
93. Okay.
Yeah, 94. Yeah, 94.
So the movement was already over, the Cinema of Transgression.
And I think that's, I think in a way that's why it worked as a book, is because everyone had been through that and they were able to talk about it. I think it would have been a very different thing if I tried to write it at the time.
Yeah, because nobody would have cared anyway.
I think nobody would have cared. And I think that, I would have just been a teenager from England. But, I think that turning up in the mid 90s to write it worked.
Is Deathtripping still in print?
So the last edition came out with Soft Skull.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's still in print or not. I mean, people can find it. I mean, it exists on.
Anybody who's interested in the only manual of the Cinema of Transgression out there should look for Jack Sargeant's Deathtripping. So, I mean, you're already interested in films. I mean, now, of course, you've been curating pretty big film festivals in Australia. I mean, what's going on with film festivals right now? What's the last thing? What's the next thing? What's happening with your curatorial skills?
So one of the things that happened with Deathtripping is, of course, no one had seen the films, right? So these films played in New York, and then film nerds like me would have VHS copies, but you couldn't see them. So one of the things we did when the book came out is organize screenings, and it kind of spun on from there because I was already previously had organized gigs and so on. So I knew what to do.
Where were you organizing the gigs? In England or in America, or where?
In England, in Brighton. So I put on gigs.
Did you get any trouble for that, for those films?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't think there was ever any hassle with, I think because it was the 90s and things were changing slightly regarding censorship and classification, so we were able to do it. So I organized those, and then then my next book came out, which was about Naked Lens, which is about beatniks in film. And again, got involved, and I've actually got asked by people to start curating for that one.
And that went around. Where were some of the cities that your film festival on Naked Lens and Beat Cinema played?
I did that in Chicago, the Chicago Underground, ATA in San Francisco. I did that in all over. And then that's the thing that first got me to Australia, because the Brisbane Film Festival invited me to come down and talk and screen a whole bunch of movies, and it was a huge thing, and that was the first time I came to Australia, and that was just Brisbane, but it was great because it got me out of England, and it got me to see more of the world, because you don't necessarily think you're going to see that much of the Southern Hemisphere when you live in Brighton.
Well, and also that Australia is so receptive to culture, to whether it's from the UK, America, or other places. I mean, they're the really great music scene, great film festivals, great museums, and unless you go there, how do you know?
Yeah, no, exactly right, and yeah, I mean, just I think that the support for the arts at that point in the late 90s was really strong. And that, so I flew down, we curated that festival, this whole sidebar of beatnik film, and there must have been I don't know, I'm going to pull a number out the air, but it would have been 40 films, something like that.
Wow. Yeah.
And things like I think we had the only print of Chappaqua, which was a crazy kind of beat psychedelic film from the mid-60s. It's just a great work. And so all kinds of stuff.
Who were some of the directors of Beat Cinema for those people who have no idea? Give us some names, some of the most extreme ones, interesting.
For that book, there was the first part of the book was talking about general beat cinema. So there was stuff like Robert Frank and Alfred Leslie, Paul My Daisy, films like that, with that Kerouac and Ginsberg and stuff. And then the book moved on to discuss William Burroughs and the films that he did with Tony Bouch and Brian Geisen and Ian Somerville. And there was a lot of underground filmmakers in there from the 50s and 60s who were kind of beat influenced and kind of part of the same creative communities.
Was it difficult to get all of these films together? I mean, the research you had to do must have been outlandish.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's that kind of like film nerd thing where you just, you start looking for things and you start, this archive and this one here. And so, you kind of make it up as you go along. No one teaches you how to do it. So you meet people and they say, this is this film I saw here. And, you can go look, and that's how it works. Because it's not like you can.
It was before YouTube.
Yeah. I think one of the things is we all, I think, who was it? I think it was, you were talking to Billy Chainsaw. I was listening to it. And he was talking in there about doing it.
We just did it. We just do it. We just did it. We still do it. That's
it. Fake it till you make it.
No, don't fake it. Just continue making stuff,
fine,
whether anybody likes
anyway,
it or not. Oh, I'm going to say it that way.
Sure.
No faking allowed.
Fine. There's truth in all that stuff, though, that you just do it. You just, and every time I'm asked by people, what's your advice or whatever for young people, it would always be, just do it. Just do not ask for permission. If you ask for permission, you're trusting a gatekeeper. You're trusting someone. If you want to do it, just do it. That's the thing I learned from putting on shows and stuff. Is
we're also lucky that not only did we not ask permission, But we faced, in spite of the materials at the time, very little censorship, as I was asking you. I mean, I do remember Kern getting kicked out of the Ritz for an image that they thought was an underage girl. It was not. And one of his Submit to Me or Submit to Me Now. And I think it was a Wise Blood. Maybe I was on the bill. I don't know, Kern's films. Then that's the only time that I remember getting any kind of censorship. And it was over one image in a Kern film, which is pretty good going, considering if this stuff was released now, forget it, a blizzard of snowflakes.
Not allowed, yeah.
I think the thing is so much stuff we were doing was also below the radar at that point. It wasn't ever big culture. It was always underground culture, you know, there's always that sense of people didn't, you know, the right people knew what you were doing. I guess, I mean, that's very much to me was that kind of underground culture, underground networks and so on, where people understand what's going on. But
I mean, that's advice I always give people too, who are like, oh, you know, I wish there were more people and wish they sold more records. I'm like, look, if the people you respect you, what more do you fucking want? It's not about the size of the audience or how many books or records you sell. It's about, there is still this tribal mentality amongst a certain, you know, coven of people that are still outside of almost everything. And we're still talking to each other and we're right here.
Yeah, I think that you using the word coven is really interesting, because that's the whole idea of the secret, you know, the secret thing that's happening at the edge of town, the secret thing that's happening, you know. I think the subcultures, the underground and stuff always is, you know.
I've yet to see it exploited fully to anyone's benefit. So I guess you're right. It's crab walking sideways through our own careers. What can I say? That's what we do.
Yeah. And I mean, that's when I started curating and stuff, you know, now people say, oh, come and do it here. And they might have more money or whatever, but I'm still doing, you know, a version of the same thing.
So what was your latest film curations? Like, what's the themes? What do you do? What was anything happening? Well, nothing was happening, obviously, during COVID, but what was right before that and what's coming next with the films under your under most people's radar?
Well, so the film festival I programmed, Revelation, that actually happened as a physical film festival this year, which is good.
Where was that and what were you showing?
That's in, even though I live in Sydney, that's in Perth on the opposite side of the country. And that's, I guess we specialize there in kind of independent cinema, documentary filmmaking, stuff like that. And then some underground stuff, some experimental stuff. We did that. And I guess, you know, that worked. And then I just finished programming Sydney Underground. So working with those guys.
When does that happen? Or did it just happen?
September, but that's happening online.
Yeah.
So what's in there? Give us some names of some, if I'm sure there's a lot of them, but any stellar pieces.
Well, we've got Beth B's new movie, obviously.
So, you mean the one about me?
Yes.
Thanks.
We've got that, all kinds of things. So that's happening. And then I'm also, of course, looking forward, because one of the things that I do is I run this conference with Sebastian and Com in Paris.
That would be Sebastian Grepo, who is
also known as you have like a million
El Grepo the Grappler, SG Sibuliani, who manages many tedious parts of my continued career, which I thank him for chronically. But yeah, and the thing is, I started the events at the University of Chicago, Paris, because I met Sebastian backstage at a Big Sexy Noise gig. He was early. I'm like, who are you? I'm Sebastian. What do you do? I work at the University of Chicago, Paris. When's my gig? So by saying that, I began all of these performances. Tim's played, Weasel's played there, Kathy Young's. A lot of people have come to events because I, like you, have also occasionally been known to curate things. And there you go. So what was this? Tell us more about the University of Chicago, Paris. What's going on there with this coming conference?
So we did this conference there, the Transgressive Cultures Conference. And the idea was it was going to happen every 2 years. And of course, the third one was due to happen this year. And obviously that's not going to happen now. So I guess we'll talk about bumping it to next year.
And what was that about?
So the idea of that is it's an open call for people who are artists, writers, academics, whoever, to come and give papers around their research into kind of transgressive transgressive areas or whatever. So we've had papers on Dessard, we've had papers on, we've had kind of performative papers, we've had, all kinds of different things happening there. It's good to get a whole bunch of people into a space to think of ideas. And the last one we did, of course, we ended up with the Flying Lutenbachers playing as their.
All right.
That's
right. I was there. I was performing.
You see, once again, it's all so connected.
It's also, to me, organizing something like that, and it's open access, right? It's not exclusive. And to me, that just goes right back to the whole thing and the importance of the whole thing of when I was a kid picking up those researches, just trying to get information out there, get people to share what they're learning, what they're researching, what they're thinking about. And to me, that's really important. And that's what, to me, film curating is, that's what putting on a band is, it's what writing a book is. It's trying to get ideas shared, learn from people, and that goes back to why did I move to Australia? Because I wanted to learn more stuff for myself. I wanted to meet other people, and I think that all plays into it,
I think the last film you recommended to me, and this is a while back, was Taxidermy, a Hungarian film about speed eaters, which I loved. And Tim's favorite hot dog was not in there, hot dog eater.
Oh, no. I got a couple of those. Okay.
Tim goes to the Nathan's hot dog eating competition.
Champion. I don't partake.
Joey Chestnut.
And Kobayashi, yes. Okay.
Anyway, Taxidermy is an absolutely stunning and disgusting Hungarian film. I loved it, I must say. Tell us a little about the books on burrows that you've done. The collection where Monty Kazaza, one of my favorite people, if we could ever track him down to be on this, God only knows, was a contributor. So it was a collection of essays on burrows that you put together. What was that?
Monty did an essay for a collection I wrote, or I edited rather, of true crime story.
Oh, yes, he would have.
Yeah.
Anybody who doesn't know who Monty Kazaza is, well, that's because he doesn't want you to know who he is. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and you're right. Monty is, of course, one of the greatest people on the planet.
Adore. He once told me, Lydia, I'm like, yes, Monty. He's like, silos. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, nobody lives in them yet. Could be coming to that. Okay, let's talk about your true crime research then. Especially, Bad Cop, my favorite title of all, which was one of your crime books.
I wrote a handful of, or edited a handful of true crime books. Yeah, you get obsessed by things. You tunnel into those subjects, and it's not something that was really fascinating. It's not something I'm necessarily going to ever write about again, though.
What was Born Bad about? Because I'm a forensic junkie. I can't go to sleep unless somebody else has been is bloody.
I wrote that in a really short amount of time.
And what is it about? What's Born Bad about?
Charles Starkweather, that was about.
Oh, right, which Badlands was based on, I believe.
Badlands was based on. And then I edited.
What about death cults? Guns, death, terror.
Death cults is the one that Monty wrote for. I don't know how you find about writing and stuff, but you enter that kind of writing zone, and when you finish it, it goes out into the world, and then you're in another writing zone, and you can't. People are like, remember when you said this? And I'm like, I did.
Trust me, I hear all the time, do you remember when you did this? I'm like, no, I don't. Well, and people don't understand about the writing zone, about how it is almost a mental trap of circular walking. I don't know what you do, but I pace around a lot. Everybody has a different style or technique of how they eventually sit down to commit something to page, how long it's going to take. Do they write an outline? I know someone like Chris Campion and Jerry Stahl, they'll write 40 to 60 page outlines. And I'm like, are you kidding? That's half the book. I have no understanding of that concept at all. So tell us about your process. Like, first of all, you're either going to take on a subject fully that you're writing the book on, or you're going to start collecting contributions from people on various subjects. But what about when you're locked in the zone?
Yeah, so I'm less and less interested in getting other people writing, and more interested in just kind of drilling into my own thinking. But I've got all these big black notebooks that I fill up with notes, and I probably don't even look at half of them again. I just write in them, and that's part of the process. And then I'll go out for coffee, then I walk around, and then I'll phone people up.
Walking around is kind of important because otherwise, I find when I have to write a bigger thing, if I'm focusing on, I put 3 to 6 p.m., 6 to 9 a.m. I give a discipline of a certain amount of hours. It doesn't matter if I'm writing 1 word or 100 pages, but I'm not going to focus on anything except for that. That's how I get books done in 3 months. Of course, I'm not writing fiction, or I'm not writing about anything other than myself for the most part, unless it's one of my anthologies. But I find that discipline is really helpful. It's the same way that musicians will go into a rehearsal studio from this hour to that hour, certain times a week. Not that I'm rehearsing, I'm just freestyling on the page.
Yeah, but I think that discipline is really important, and it's how you approach that. And the actual act of writing is comparatively easy, but it's the thinking that takes so long. So I spend a lot of time, like you're saying, pacing around and stuff.
Absolutely. And for us non-creative, for the non-creative types, when you're sitting on the couch, they're like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "What do you think I'm like?"
I'm working.
You're working it out.
Leave me alone. Hey, every hour I spent watching forensics, I'm working. It's true. I'm working. And the other side of that too is, sometimes you need to absolutely do zero zip zilch with no sound or talking or anybody else. And you have to just sit in a blank space, getting blank as part of the process. You have to kind of empty out so you can fill up again. That's for me what I have to do.
And also, I think it's important to try and write notes or remember dreams and things like that, even though they won't turn up in what you're doing. It's just a way of getting into, it's a weird kind of physical metaphor, but getting into a different part of your brain, a different part of your thinking.
Well, and also when it's pen to paper, it has a very different effect. And for instance, I'm just going back to the writing of Paradoxe, which I had a computer, but I wrote on a typewriter because it needed that physicality. So, I think there's also some connection. Like, I love when people are writing notes. Tim always has a notebook. I have notebooks. Tim, of course, writes so small an ant couldn't read it. I don't know how he manages. He's got great eyesight. But I love I love when people have notebooks, carry notebooks, take down notes. I don't care what you write on the bathroom wall for all I care. Some of the best poetry is there. But it's just the physicality of that, I think, releases another form of thinking, because the computer and just the electricity of it, people don't realize we are being poisoned by electricity, is a very different thing.
You can tell that people write differently on the computer because there's a different, you don't get into that physicality that you have with a pen or a typewriter. But it's also, you can see that people have moved blocks of text around, and and when you're sitting there with a pen and drawing arrows over your notes,
I find it more poetic. Exactly. I find that a lot of my more poetic passages are going to come from a pen on paper because they just do.
Yeah. But all writers write in a different way. And I think it's in the end, you've got that, that blank page or that blank screen, and you have to fill it up.
Are you a doodler?
Oh yeah, I doodle all the time.
How did I know?
You can't see but I've got
Well, I can. I saw it before you said yes. Of course, I know you're a doodler.
I draw cats and skulls and things.
All right.
Table with my cat opposite me, so I'll get bored and I'll just start doodling the cat.
Did you get in trouble as a kid by teachers for doodling? That was a one growing up. They're like, "What are you doing?" If you're doodling, you're not paying attention or something.
Hey, some call it a doodle, others call it a work of art.
Yeah, the doodling thing at school, I definitely had that, but I had such a weird. My school education weren't the best years of my life.
I was a diddler. I like to diddle in school.
Were you a good student, Jack?
No, I was the weird kid. So it was.
Do you have to deal with bullying when you say you're the weird kid, or did you have to just where you said okay?
Once you're the kid for the strange kid, the kid who likes weird stuff. That's
especially in England. I could only imagine.
Well, wait, because there are a lot of other weirdos in England at the time. So
I know, but there's also a lot. There's a lot of violence and bullying.
I didn't hear what Jack said though. When you're the weird kid, what?
You just learn to duck. You learn to keep your mouth. When you walks into school with spiky hair or whatever. Or, it was just,
I mean, I've said this before, but I think me growing up as a teenager in the glam era, which is weird because you would think growing up in the punk era more that you kind of post-punk as you did. But growing up in the glam era, they left us weirdos alone because we just looked too cool. So fuck you. And they couldn't say anything. They couldn't bully us. Plus, hello, you want to bully me? Even at 2, I was a bully. Bring it on.
When I was at school, it was the early 80s. It was a big time for football casuals.
Chelsea Smile. Chelsea Smile.
So, I mean, I didn't get into any problems with them, but there was definitely a very macho kind of vibe.
Well, we had Ian White on the podcast recently, and he would get beaten up all the time for nothing, which is horrendous.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful, and I think most people of my generation would have had that experience. School was not a good place. I ended up doing my education after I'd left school, like my formal education, because I did so badly at school, and then I went back and did evening classes and stuff.
Tim, were you a bully?
Kind of.
No,
but I also have compassion. So it was some tough love sometimes. I mean, if someone cries because their pita bread was stolen from their lunch bag, sometimes you got to kind of make a little violent comedy to kind of correct the scenario.
Well, whatever you were like as a child, Tim, you are very compassionate, but don't fuck with Mr. Doll because you'll get it with his razor sharp tongue.
Well, yeah, it's more just a war of words. And to be honest, frankly, this is not about me, but frankly, I'd be so bored in school that I had to find my own entertainment. And sometimes it was mean.
There's definitely that relationship, right? No one's relationship with school is just one or the other. But I think by the time that I started really being noticed at school, I kind of just retreated, and I actually spent a lot of time in the darkroom just doing photography at school.
I spent a lot of time in the bathroom.
Oh, I did. I spent a lot of time in the bathroom having some fun, and of course, getting in trouble with my friends like Simon Slater, and playing music. Playing music was a real good one.
You amateur teenagers.
Oh,
anyway, let's get back.
Yeah, I'm not gonna incriminate myself. Yeah.
Please don't. We'll leave that for the after party.
Sure.
So what's coming up then next, Jack? You said that there is the September Sydney Virtual Fest.
Yeah, so Sydney Underground Festival that's going to be online. Then I'm just writing. I'm trying to get a whole bunch of things written. Like everyone else on the planet, I'm hoping that I can get back on doing stuff and seeing people and doing readings and talks and stuff.
Well, I'm very sad. Retrovirus will be in Los Angeles and San Francisco at the end of November, and we're not going to be creeping towards Australia at that point. Oh my God! Because
perfect time.
I'll take that long ride just to get to you, Jack. What can I say?
I mean, that last tour you did here was great, and we had such a good time.
So fun.
So. And I remember saying goodbye to you in the street, and we were like, "Who knows what's going to happen?" Because the whole
I know, yeah, and we didn't even know that a week later, coming down, the COVID that is.
We flew out of Melbourne on that last tour?
I don't remember. One thing I do remember is the Hobart Airport, where they have bronze sculptures of Tasmanian devils with suitcases. I love that. I have to say that's one of the cutest parts of any airport I've ever seen. And also, you remember my little flirtation with those 6 police at the Hobart Airport, Tim?
Oh, yes, I do.
Well, it happens all the time.
I also had Castlemaine. I had an exotic experience deciding to hit the town or hit the countryside after the show and hit a whole family of, not literally, but not ran into literally, but came across a whole family of kangaroos. It doesn't dawn on me that they're like Australia's deer. You'll just like drive around the stage, just come into a bunch of deer all the time. Well, this is a whole pack of kangaroos.
Yeah, and I mean, hugging a koala is one thing. Getting kicked in the crotch by a kangaroo is totally another. Yeah, no
thanks.
Jack, have you ever run into any deadly creatures in the Outback?
Good question.
Because, Tim likes to talk about all kinds of
all the deadly things in Australia.
Deadly stories, yeah.
Look, I've seen poisonous spiders.
Oh yeah.
But after the first time you scream and
well, after 3 times that they try to kill you, I just see a spider and I fucking squash it. Let me just tell you that.
What about like a box jellyfish in the ocean or any of that kind of shit?
I've never seen any of that stuff, but we get house spiders that are like, big as a saucer kind of thing.
Are they tasty, covered in chocolate?
I mean, it's the first time you see these, you freak out, but after a while you realize they're harmless. The ones that really did baffle me was the first little spider I saw here that was poisonous. It was maybe the size of a thumbnail. And
well, that's it. Often the tinier the creature, they can be like jellyfish. The tiniest ones can be absolutely deadly.
Yeah, well, it's the same with the octopus here as well.
Yeah, that little octopus, that thing's like the deadliest thing in the sea.
One spider that almost killed me was like the size of a period at the end of a sentence. Motherfucker, that's how small it was.
When you first see a spider that jumps, and you're like, how the fuck, who invented the idea of a jumping spider?
Well, who knew that a chicken could jump into a tree? I didn't know that till I lived in Louisville for a little while, so it's kind of the same.
I mean, what is going on? What are the mechanisms involved? Those things jump really far. I mean, to scale, it'd be like one of us jumping on top of a skyscraper.
But strangely enough, strangely enough, a tarantula, if it falls, can die of a heart attack, like a tarantula. So, I mean, having had a tarantula, which is why I think the babies came back to eventually try to kill me in the past, but tarantulas are pretty fragile. So you never know. Deadly, fragile. I mean, I don't even know where to go with it.
One of the things that made me fascinated by being in Australia as someone who grew up in England is that sense of, it's so the opposite of Europe, you get these like animals that are big, animals that I mean, kangaroos aren't in Sydney, but you don't have to drive very far to Sydney.
Not at all.
And I like the fact that you have koalas, and I mean the Blue Mountains, which is probably the size of I don't know, they're huge, and they're like an hour and a half out of Sydney, and you just go up these mountains. It's just a forest as far as you can see, and I love that.
It's unbelievably beautiful, Australia, and and unbelievably terrifying on the other hand as well, just from the wildlife. And there's, it was a prison colony at one point.
I mean, once you get to like the north, then it gets terrifying. I think the saltwater crocs and all that stuff. It's yikes.
I've never been to the Northern Territory or north of Queensland, so one day I will go there.
Darwin, you never been to Darwin?
Never been to Darwin, so I've been to most of the cities, and I've been to Tasmania a lot because of the UFO festival. But I've very, very rarely. I don't think I've been much further north than Brisbane.
The thing about Tasmania, because I've been there 2 or 3 times, I can't even remember, but I'm always in Hobart. I feel like I never really did it because isn't it about the countryside? Or?
The countryside there is kind of. I mean, it's so empty. It's to me.
Okay, it is. I haven't even.
I just bringing this back around to your field of expertise, Jack. In the last few years, stellar, outrageous, groundbreaking films. Any? Because I feel that TV at this point has had some pretty good shows on that are almost topping some films. Because you'll see, for me, I don't see as many films as you do, but I'll see one film when everyone thinks, okay, that was amazing. But there's a lot of kind of incredible TV series. So how about a few names of some films that have caught your eye in the last few years?
Oh man, I always never answer these questions. Films I mean, I watch a lot of films. I watch probably several hundred films a year.
Wow. Impressive.
Oh, it's just, because of curating and stuff, I end up watching a lot of stuff for film festivals that isn't necessarily stuff I like, but I watch it. But films that have really stuck with me. There was a really good film called Holiday, which is about a gangster's girlfriend, which was incredibly dark. And that's something I thought was really, really good.
Did you see The House That Jack Built? With Matt Dillon?
Yeah, that's Lars von Trier, isn't it?
Yeah. It was the only film of his I liked, actually.
I like The House That Jack Built. Again, something else that was really, really dark, but very effective film. I really like The Lighthouse, the film The
Oh,
Lighthouse.
it's
Oh,
beautiful.
I didn't get to see that one. I want to check it out.
It's beautiful.
Well, I mean, Willem Dafoe, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and Robert Patterson, who I've just come to kind of dig. I didn't really know anything about him until I saw Good Time, which was by the same people that made
The prequel to Good Times.
You know, it was the same people that made
The Safdie brothers.
Yeah, it was really good. And then I'm like, Robert Patterson playing such a sleazeball. He's pretty good, actually. And The Lighthouse was great. I mean, look, two men alone in black and white in a lighthouse, drinking themselves into insanity.
I'm eagerly awaiting the new Verhoeven lesbian nun movie that's been a little controversial. People were going a little nuts about it. I didn't see Elle. I should see Elle. I don't know if you're a Verhoeven fan or not.
Verhoeven's fans always worth watching, I think.
I agree.
But with The Lighthouse, what I liked about The Lighthouse so much, not only did it look really good, the black and white cinematography, not only was the performances good, but that incredible sound design where you just had the noise of the foghorn going. The thing at the cinema and just hearing that was just, I really like good, I'm getting old. I like good sound design in the film.
Well, I love films that only have 2 or 3 people. I mean, I love the early Polanski films for that reason. Death and the Maiden as well. I mean, I love films that have a very small cast. Oh, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? One of my favorite films of all time. It's just absolutely. So I like a small cast. In essence, I almost like, something that is a play, which Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf was, transmitted to film when it's done, or like Death and the Maiden when it's done well.
No, that thing with a small, tight cast and tight narrative is, I think that you can really delve into kind of emotional depth and things like that. And I think that works really well. Did you see The Witch? I mean, The Witch I just thought was great. Again,
And the same person that did The Lighthouse, right?
Yeah. And it had that sense of claustrophobia again, that sense of, even though they're in the middle of, the whole continent in front of them, but they're just closed in on that farm and there's those woods you don't want to go into. And the atmosphere and the soundtrack and stuff is just...
What amazes me, and I was just talking to a friend who went off to a cabin, not you, Tim, recently. And I'm like, what is it about? I mean, is it horror films that made cabins so scary, or the woods? Because really, the chance of running into anybody else, unless they're truly a sniffer dog stalker, when you're in a place that's so absent of everybody else, is very, very minor. Yet, putting the fear of nature and isolation into people's minds, what the hell is that all about? I mean, you're more likely to get stabbed with a screwdriver on the Q train in New York than you are to get attacked in a cabin by a maniac with an axe handle.
As a species, I think we have a real weird misunderstanding of danger and fear. So yeah, the idea of being alone in a cabin terrifies us. The idea of having a few beers and getting in a car, and we're fine with it. But
oh yes, we are.
We make really bad decisions, generally, and it's really fascinating because, horror films are all based on things that, I mean, I would be quite happy to spend a night in a dark cabin in the woods by myself. It would not worry me,
Jack, I'll be right behind you.
Oh boy.
Watch out. I'm not afraid of the dark, the woods, or cabins. As a matter of fact, in my mind's eye, I'm there at all times.
Well, the stabbing cabins are my specialty.
The stabbing cabins?
Yeah. Stabbing cabins.
I just have to throw this in because I'm not a fan of horror in general, unless I love the French film Martyrs. I think it's just one of the best horror films ever. Just absolutely. But I love the Saw series because
I do too.
I love the appliances.
I agree, but I think, how many of them are there? Like 6 or something?
On the plane coming back from the West Coast, they had one. The latest one is called Spiral with Chris Rock. Now delete. I couldn't even watch a quarter of it. They did have a good scene where a cop is in a subway track and gets his tongue ripped off and run over. But I didn't get much further because Chris Rock sticks to comedy. But I do like the first few Saw.
I like the first few Saws, and it came around the same time as the Final Destination series, which is, it's already funny to have a sequel to Final Destination just by the title alone, but very silly stuff, but I enjoyed it.
In terms of horror films, though, a lot of that stuff they're not really horror, but a lot of the kind of new wave of French brutality.
Yeah, I was
films.
just going to say exactly, which Martyrs is to me the top of the list. I mean, I showed it to a few people. They were like, I might never talk to you again. I'm like, oh, that's okay. Bob Burke got a little squeamish on that one.
I always like it when you present art, whether it's movie or music, and you completely alienate yourself from people that you thought would love you forever. And what kind of I went. So have you ever seen the movie? Not Old Boy, the Korean movie Bad Guy. Have you seen that one?
I know Old Boy. I don't know Bad Guy.
I remember I took a date to that one. And it's basically tricking a woman into prostitution. And it's basically a movie of nonstop rape. And it's, it's hard to endure after a while. And basically I took a date to it. I never knew really what the details were.
Well, I'm sure that was the last time.
Exactly. She's like, what kind of movie is this? I go, what? It's an art film.
All right, Tim. Platform, Jack. Did you see that? Spanish film, really Platform, about a prison that has multiple levels, and it's about Platform is amazing. It's not horror, it's psychological insanity about a prison that has multiple levels, and it has a platform of food that they decide who's going to eat and who's not. And it's kind of like another one of my favorite, not really horror films, Cube, which I love. I love the architecture of Cube, even though it is just a white cube. I love films like that. The Spanish do great horror films too. Wreck, which was great, not the American version. In a Glass Cage, one of my all-time top favorite films.
Did you see Dogtooth?
Yes. Yeah. Dogtooth.
That's another film that I thought was really great. I really enjoyed that one. It's the terror of the family and you must never leave the compound. And that was another film that I thought was really effective.
A series that I thought was interesting that recently was on one of the streamers, I don't remember which, called Them, which was about the first Black family in like the late 60s moving into all white Compton. Did you see that? Which not only are they being terrorized by the racism of these, idiot white people, but then they're also being haunted by different kind of ghouls within the house. And the father, who's an engineer, totally, thumbprinted at work, has this Black minstrel advisor ghost being. I thought that was pretty good. Them.
I have to say I haven't watched that one. My viewing is always a bit like a year behind everyone else because so much of my life is watching films.
Well, we can trade notes between films and forensics and the streaming.com. We've met each other in many cities over many decades, and I do believe that shall continue to be what we do as people that wander the planet bringing art and terror, which shakes in our wake.
Yeah, no, definitely. Many more times.
Hopefully in Australia, Brooklyn, San Francisco, Poland, even. I don't care where. Anyway, this has been the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Jack Sargeant. And check out some of his numerous books on all kinds of counterculture films, burros, true crime, etc. His curatorial skills will hopefully, maybe you can go virtual with the Sydney Film Fest this September.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Always great to see you, Jack. Always great to see you.